97 political reporter Charles Thomas gave you the straight news. Now he's giving you real talk on the governor's race.
These Democrats are into name calling. They'll call people a racist, a misogynist, a homophobic person, or whatever, because they want to distract from the fact that they've accomplished so little in public office. It's time people woke up and recognized that. J.B. Pritzker, what's he ever done outside of being born on third base and telling the world he hit a triple? J.B. Pritzker and his people called Darren Bailey an extremist. Darren Bailey? I met the man. He's a family farmer. Somebody who understands what it's like to go to work every day. Somebody who's fair-minded. I could trust this guy. Yeah, a farmer from Southern Illinois. Yeah. Farmer from Southern Illinois.
Paid for by People Who Play by the Rules PAC.
Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People's Show with Charles Thomas and Mark Wallace here on Intellectual Radio every Monday night from 7 o'clock until 9 p.m. We'll be taking your phone calls at 708-223-8953. That is 708-223-8953. And we are glad to welcome Brother Charles. Welcome back.
Hey, I missed last week, had a little bout, and really could not do it. The drive was going to take me out, but I'm back, feeling pretty good, thanks to the miracle of modern medicine,
and thankfully that you made a speedy recovery, and I think that it is a testament of how important it really is, because I know that people are tired of COVID-19, but COVID-19 has not said that it is tired of spreading itself. And so thankfully, you made a speedy recovery. And I think that I read some data on the vaccines and to show the hospitalization rates of those people who were not vaccinated and the hospitalization rates of those people who are vaccinated. And we have billions and billions of people have been vaccinated. So I think that the question of safety of the vaccines can certainly be taken off the table. And you cannot escape the data. So I'm grateful.
I'm not, the data, I'm thankful that, what I had was not hospitalizationable. Just felt like a bad cold, a really bad cold.
Yeah.
And my wife said I had a fever, but that was with the touch of her hand, as opposed to any kind of quantifiable thermometer or anything like that. But I got through it. But most people who do contract COVID-19, they do recover, and the vast majority recover. And I think a lot of it has to do with your health condition.
Right.
Prior to contracting the disease. And there's a lot of sickness out there, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of these conditions, what do they call them? Pre-existing conditions, right, or whatever. So it makes sense. If you have a precondition, you absolutely need to do everything you can to protect yourself.
And I think it's it's not only in this case of protecting yourself, but it's certainly protecting other people around you who could have.
They call them
comorbidities.
Yeah, but they say that those people are also that it doesn't. The vaccination does not stop you from spreading the virus. I think that's been proven, quantified that it doesn't, and that whether or not, people, I respect the rights of those who say they don't want to take the vaccine. That's what I'm getting to. I respect their right because it is their body and they should have control over their body. And when you have someone like a professional athlete, like this Kyrie Irving guy who didn't want to take the vaccine in order to play in the NBA in New York, he could play on the road, but he couldn't play in his home city because he didn't have the vaccine. At that point, I think a lot of this vaccine stuff gets a little bit out of control. Here's a professional athlete who's in the peak of health, who doesn't want to take the vaccine. I respect that person's right to not to do that.
No, I don't disrespect.
I took the vaccine.
I don't.
Keep
Yeah, I
in
don't.
mind.
I don't
mean,
disrespect anybody's right, but I think that if there is a communal or an organizational agreement that we're going to function in a certain way as an organization, you have the right to say, I don't want to do that, but you also don't get the right to participate.
Yeah, you get canceled.
Right.
They call it getting canceled.
Well, I don't think it's called cancel. You cancel yourself.
You
cancel yourself.
It's a matter of, yeah. I mean, I think, but you accept that.
Right.
And I think a lot of people did accept that, but
Yeah.
it didn't stop them from expressing that. And I would defend their right to do that in order to protect what goes into their body. And that if they want to make that decision, they can make it. And I respect that. And I don't want to.
I don't disrespect that at all, but I also don't agree with the fact that there were people using that to attack the organization.
No, that's
to attack the organ. No,
Well,
the people
you
were
suppose they
attacking
are,
the.
but I mean,
the,
I don't.
the
I don't
organization,
think
but this was something that everybody agreed to do.
No, everybody
within-
didn't agree to do it. That was the problem.
No, within
That
the
some
organization.
people did not agree to do that, and they didn't feel as though they should lose their jobs or their livelihood because they wanted to make a decision about their body, and they made it.
Yeah, well, listen, when we grew up, we all had tetanus shots, polio shots, and whatever else.
And they worked.
Whatever else shots there were.
And they worked.
And there was no argument. Your mama told you, go around the corner to XYZ and get in line and get your shot so you can be ready to go to school on Monday. And you just went around the corner. You might have not wanted to get it, and you might have frowned because you just didn't like shots. But you got your butt over there and you got your shot.
Yeah,
and
you got your shot.
And
There's
there was
no
no
doubt. I got
argument.
mine.
There was no, all of this. A lot of this anti-vaccination stuff started with, I forget the actress name, and one of the Kennedy brothers that started this whole revolt on vaccinations with children
I
of
remember when
autism.
Kamala Harris said she wouldn't take it as long as Donald Trump
so-
had anything to do with it. She said that, and a lot of people, it was politicized.
I'm not talking. I'm not talking way before this.
No, I'm
Way
talking
before
about
this.
when she said she expressed serious doubts about whether or not she would take a shot that Donald Trump had anything to do with. I absolutely remember that. And I think that it goes to the whole politicization of the whole pandemic response. The other thing too is that there wasn't the established protocols of the CDC were not followed, because this was put on, as Donald Trump called it, Operation Warp Speed, and a lot of the testing was not done. And I think that had a lot to do with many people who didn't want to take the shot.
Yeah, but the
because it had
Operation
not
Warp Speed
been-
had nothing to do with the developmental of the vaccine.
Oh, come on now, Mark.
no,
Come on, man. It
Operation
started-
Warp Speed.
Donald Trump was the president.
Operation Warp
when it
Speed
started.
had nothing to do
And
with the
he called
developmental
it
of
that.
the vaccine.
called it that.
Operation Warp Speed, I'm telling you what it was. It was about the distribution. It had nothing to do
But okay,
with the developmental of the vaccine.
The vaccine was developed in a shorter period than the normal
No, it was
CDC.
not.
Oh, come on.
No, it was
Come
not.
on, man. I mean,
No,
I
it was
can't
not.
sit here like this.
Well, I'm just
If you
telling
don't believe that,
Well,
the
but it's factually incorrect.
It started in 2020 when Donald Trump was president and in charge of the CDC. That's when it started, and that's when the research began on the vaccine, and it was moved quickly.
on that
It was
particular
moved quickly.
strand.
Whatever
but
strand,
the-
but that's
but
when it
the-
all started.
No, it didn't start.
Oh man,
It didn't start in
there
2020.
was no COVID-19 prior to.
That is a
prior to
strand. That is a
2020.
strand. That is a strand of SARS. There was a developmental that was
Well, I don't
going
know about
on.
SARS
Well, I'm
and all
just
that.
trying
I'm
to
just
tell
saying
you.
that when the pandemic started in March, late February, March of 2020, Donald Trump was president. He was the one talking about developing a vaccine, not who was it?
No, he
Before
wasn't
him,
talking about developing a
huh?
vaccine. What he was talking about is using bleach and Clorox. He wasn't talking about developing a vaccine. It was this guy.
That didn't happen either.
It
By
was
the
this
way, the
guy's.
bleach and Clorox. That he didn't tell anybody to use bleach or Clorox.
What did he say? He
He
said it
said
from the
he said
White
he
House
said something
press
about
room.
he was speaking as on an aside, saying
No,
something
he wasn't
about
speaking on the side. He
why
was
can't you-
standing. He was
because
standing at the
look,
presidential.
Mark,
He was
he-
standing
I know,
in the White
fine,
House briefing
okay,
room.
good. I'll give you all that. But he never I don't think anybody injected bleach in their arm or wherever to fight COVID-19.
Well,
That did not
thank
happen.
God, thank God he had
What
people
did
around
happen
him.
is that he directed the CDC or whoever it was who develops the FDA to develop a vaccine. That's when it started. He did it.
No, he did not.
And people had questions about it, including Kamala Harris, who wondered aloud how it could be done so quickly without the testing protocol. It was finished and they started injecting people, and there were a number of people who did not want to be injected with a vaccine that had not been fully tested by the FDA. That's a fact. You can't deny that. It happened during Donald Trump's presidency. After Trump was unelected, then Joe Biden took over, and he insisted that people take the vaccine to protect themselves.
Well, the vaccine
and
was being
other
distributed
people. That's what
before.
happened.
The vaccine was being distributed before Joe Biden was elected.
Absolutely.
But it was not being.
Yes.
It was not being
But because it was
distributed.
Donald Trump's
It was not being
shepherding
distributed.
of the vaccine.
It was not being distributed
Let's
at the
move
rate
on, man,
it
'cause
should
this is-
have.
I can't talk about something like this. This is
But I don't know why.
because it's not, because what you're saying is not the vaccine. The development of the vaccine began under Donald Trump, and you're denying that. And
Who's
I can't
denying
understand
that?
it. You are.
I'm not denying that.
Okay,
I'm
fine.
just
So
telling
we're on
you.
the same page.
Yeah, I'm not
We're on the
denying
same
that.
page.
What I'm telling
and a lot
you.
of people have concerned about the vaccine not being fully vetted, tested before they took it.
Well, he should
And
have never
those people did
politicized
not
it.
want to take it.
Well, he should have never politicized it because he was the first person
Well,
to start
you know,
politicizing it.
Well, you know, if
And
that's if you call it politicization,
no, but his job as
however,
the president of the United
but
States.
he was the
when-
guy that
whenever-
started the vaccine.
This was a
that pushed
worldwide
it along.
problem. This was a worldwide problem. And as the president of the United States, people looked to the president to bring some type of assurances and some type of calm.
And he
that
did not.
he did not do.
He did not do that,
Okay.
and that's
That he
why a
did
lot
not
of
do.
people don't want to take the vaccine.
Unfortunately. Well, more and more people are. All right. Let's move on to something else. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about is the World Series, something a little lighter. The World Series is going on. Tonight is the third game of the World Series. The Philadelphia Phillies and the Houston Astros are in the World Series. And this is the first time in 50 years that there is not an American black player playing in the World Series
Wow.
on either team.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's deep. They're not for either team.
Not
but
for
Dusty
either
Baker
team.
is the manager.
Boy, but they're talking about players. They're talking
yeah.
about players. There's not an American black player playing, and that hadn't happened since 1950. I'm sorry, it hadn't happened since 1950 because Jackie Robinson was the first black to play in a World Series in 1947. That they went on to win that World Series, and then not since 1950 that there is not an American-born black player playing on
Why do you
either
think
team.
that is?
I think there could be a combination of reasons. I think that baseball, for a lot of the foreign players, it's like a get out of jail card for them. In some ways, because in places like Venezuela and Mexico and some of the other foreign countries, baseball is, it is a highly, sought out thing like football is here, baseball is there. And I think that more and more of the players are seeing that there's great opportunities in being able to play Major League Baseball here. So there's more and more foreign players that are being given contracts in the major leagues. And I tell you, when you see some of these players that on the Houston Astros pitching squad, most of them, most of them are black foreign players from Venezuela, and I mean they are ace pitchers. Their pitching depth is deep.
Well, I watched I guess it was in the 90s. I actually went to the Cuban World Series and saw some incredible baseball. Baseball is a religion of sorts in Cuba, as well as in Puerto Rico, where I've also seen games. And I've also watched games in the Dominican Republic, where Sammy Sosa is from. It is a religion down there. All you need is a ball, a bat, and a lot of times the kids play barehanded in those countries. And there's a lot of space to play baseball. Whereas I think as more black people in the United States moved into urban areas, they don't have the space to play baseball. And baseball can be, at least in this country, a fairly expensive sport. Whereas down there, they don't seem to get caught up in the expense of it. Here, you got to have a league, you've got to have umpires, you got to have uniforms, and a lot of kids, and you also have to have 18 kids, maybe more, to play the game, to play hardball. And I think in the United States, we don't have that kind of community anymore. When I say a sense of community, where you could actually pull together 20 kids to have a full-fledged baseball game in the city. I mean, my father played baseball. It was a religion to him. He played on up through the semi-pros, and I think he at one point tried out for the Kansas City Monarchs, which is the famous team that Satchel Paige played for back in the 1930s and 40s.
Satchel Paige. This is a person who a lot of people don't unaware about, that this guy was a pitching genius.
And actually pitched well into his 40s. When he finally was able to get into the major leagues. He actually pitched during the 1950s. He went from the late 1920s, 30s into the 50s pitching, and still had great stuff,
right,
as they call it in baseball. But I think that we have changed geographically. We have changed culturally to where the game is just not part of the world of young black people. I think the exception was the Jackie Robinson Little League team.
Right.
And then that got caught up in some mess.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, I think that, we see the great basketball players, certainly, that the black community in the United States still produces, and football players. But baseball, I don't know. I think that I think we're moved away from the game, and certainly the game is kind of moved away from us.
Yeah, I think there's some economic challenges that comes along with baseball, because, as you say, it's a team sports, which requires that you have all these uniforms and equipment and all that sort of thing. Because as a kid, I played baseball, but I didn't excel at baseball rapidly enough, because the sports that I played, I excelled at. I was a great swimmer. I was a great diver. I was a great tennis player. I still play tennis. And I did very well in football and all of the sports that I played, and I never tried to play basketball. But baseball, I was a pitcher, and I was developing very, very late. And I used to get teased quite a bit by the outfielders, because they had to work very hard when I was on the mound.
Well, I was actually a pretty good hitter.
Yeah.
You know, I could hit the baseball. I had great eyesight. My father had great eyesight too,
Mhm.
so I could hit the ball. Where I fell short is that in the field, I didn't have the arm, to throw anybody out. And
Okay.
defensively, I couldn't play. Maybe they had designated hitters today, but I was a light hitter. I didn't hit the ball a long way, but I could always make contact.
Yeah.
I know I loved that game. I loved baseball.
Yeah.
I mean,
wish I
could-
would have. I do
Man.
wish I would have stayed with it a little bit longer, because I probably could have developed to be a decent player. But I was just, man, I was so distraught at my inability to be better at the time that I was developing. That I just left it alone. And my mother didn't force me to do it, which she did force me to do the other sports, but she didn't force me to do that one. So I got out of
But
that.
no
one.
black players, no
American-born black players in
players.
this
Man,
World
that's
Series
crazy.
for the first time since 1950s.
Should I watch?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, when I go home tonight,
But the game's postponed tonight, I think.
they
There's rain
postponed
in
it.
Philadelphia.
Oh.
I was just reading that on the
Okay.
internet.
All right, so I won't be able to watch that one, and we'll have more people paying attention to
Mhm.
what we're doing. Okay, good. In other news, Brandon Johnson, a CTU, I guess he's a CTU executive now, or on the board, or something like that.
Well, he's a county commissioner.
He's a
He's
county
Cook
commissioner.
County commissioner.
He's a Cook County
That is
commissioner.
his job. That's what he does right now, and I think
Mhm.
that's how he is able to run for mayor and not risk his seat on the county board. He goes way back with CTU. I mean,
Yes.
he is a CTU guy through and through,
Mhm.
and I don't know if that's going to help or hurt him at this point, because there is a degree of disillusionment with the Chicago public schools. And now when you talk about the public schools, you got to talk about CTU, because they wield so much power within that system. And it could be a positive for him, in as much as he is going to have 25,000 troops at the ready, people to go out and support him. It could be a disadvantage, in as much as the Chicago Public Schools has such a horrible reputation right now, and the CTU is seen as part and parcel now of the problem, as well as what's going on at CPS headquarters. So it's going to be an interesting situation. He's got troops. He's going to have money, because CTU has already said they're going to back him. I think him getting into the race is really going to make Chuy Garcia take a moment to think about whether or not he wants to get in. Remember that Chuy ran when Karen Lewis did not run
Right.
against Rahm.
Right.
And Chuy had the benefit of the Chicago Teachers Union in his run. This time around, Chuy's going to have to find his own troops and his own money. And I wonder if he's going to be able to do that, if the Mexican-American community has developed in such a way since that first run, that it can sustain Chuy Garcia on his own, so to speak, without CTU backing him.
Well, the Mexican American community has its own set of challenges, and they're not just a monolithic community. I mean, they have some divides within that community. So he's going to have to really weigh whether or not he's going to get heavy support that he would need from the Mexican American community and the Latino community. Anyway,
very interesting about the Latino community and what's happened there, the dynamic. It used to be that the Puerto Rican community was sort of the leadership, brain trust, if you will, of the Latino political movement. Well, that seems to be waning now. Now you see Chuy supported, I think it was Delia Ramirez for the congressional seat, the new congressional seat, the 3rd district,
Mm-hmm.
and Gilbert Villegas, who was one of the top aldermen in the city, Puerto Rican,
Mhm.
was defeated by Delia Ramirez. Luis Gutierrez is still in Chicago. No, not a peep about Luis Gutierrez running for mayor. That leadership era, it seems now, has passed, and that Mexican Americans, who make up the majority by vast numbers of Latinos in Chicago, is moving off on its own with
Well,
its
and
own
I think,
leadership.
but I also think that they are going to have um, because they're, be it real or not, there's a real problem with the Black community supporting people, because you have what I consider to be a lot of negative false rhetorics as it relates to Blacks and Hispanic and that sort of thing. So I think that also becomes a challenge, because when Chuy Garcia ran for mayor, we supported him, strongly supported him, meaning my organizations supported him and tried to rally support for Chuy Garcia, in particular because he was one of the first candidates that said that the first day that he became mayor, if he were elected, is that he would repeal photo enforcement of red light cameras in Chicago. And he gave us a meeting. We sat down with him. We talked with him, and also talked with him about other issues. But we supported him. But that was a lot of the rhetoric. There was a lot of the rhetoric, and I was very disappointed to see that. That kind of attitude out there. I was really disappointed to see that at that time. I don't know that Chewy will have as strong of a run this time.
He couldn't. I
Yeah.
mean, he couldn't. Not only are there so many Black candidates in the race that are going to carve up that vote, he still has the issue of whether or not immigrants will be able to vote. They can't vote right now in Chicago. I think that's going to change. It's going to be a major issue in the campaign for mayor, whether or not undocumented immigrants are going to be given the right to vote in Chicago. It's going to be a big issue. But right now they don't have it, which I think is really going to stunt the political growth of Chuy Garcia, especially now that the CTU is going to get behind Brandon Johnson. It's going to be a tough road. I don't know that he's going to do it. I would advise him not to do it.
Well, I think that he is going to take the same look at that, because he's now a congressman.
Right.
And
but he's going to be a backbencher in November. I mean, next term.
So he's now a congressman, and I think he's going to weigh very heavily on whether or not he would want to run for. I mean, he's going to really I think he's going to look at it very carefully, and I suspect that he is not going to jump into this race. I think that he's going to look at the field and he's going to say, you know what, not this time. Not this time.
Well, but he's not getting any younger. I think Chewy is late 60s now. I don't know that he's getting any younger, and his wife has a lot to say about what he does politically. At least that's the way it was when he ran against Rahm. I mean, she was right there at his side.
Mhm.
She was his number one advisor, very smart woman, and he's smart to listen to her. So I think she'll have a lot to say about it as well.
Well, isn't any married man smart to listen to?
Absolutely, but
oh.
It takes a long time, man. Take it from me.
Huh?
Believe me, man, to be able to get to the point where you say, yes, dear, it takes a minute. It takes a lot of growing up.
It didn't take me long.
Didn't take you long?
No,
because
I just
time, man.
I don't believe in sweating the small stuff.
Oh, man, I've been married 45, almost 48 years. I've been married, man.
Oh, well, you should be good at it.
Yeah, no, but two different women.
Well, you still should be good at it.
I'm real
You
good at
still
it.
should be good at it.
I know
okay?
when to
All right.
STFU.
So you didn't get it right the first time.
Well-
So this time you should have it a little more right, at least, right?
Oh yeah,
Huh?
yeah, definitely.
I mean, I met your wife, so
Yeah.
and she
No,
seems
she's-
like a
she's,
wonderful person.
Yeah,
so,
but she's she
yeah,
she's my top advisor. My top advisor.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's listen, it's nice to have somebody that you can sit down and enjoy having a sandwich with. Yeah, because the Bible does say
But
that
does she make
you would
sandwich?
be better. You would be better to sit out on the corner of the house, the roof of the house, than to be in the house with an evil wife.
Oh, you don't want that.
You don't want that. So
You don't
yeah.
want that.
So
But see that my
I
wife,
guess that's where that
my
saying
wife
comes
is my
from.
adult supervision. So I can appreciate that.
Oh, that's good.
Definitely.
That's good.
Yeah.
That they helped you.
But going back to Brandon Johnson a minute. Good luck to my brother. I think he'll immediately vault into becoming one of the top
contenders
because of CTU and the power that CTU wields right now. But I think that the leading candidate right now, who do you think that is? Is it Lori because she's the incumbent?
Well, you have to give it to the incumbent, just based on history, whether that's going to, stand, because we now have to wait to see who is going to make the ballot, right? You got to have 7,500 good signatures to make the ballot, which means you got to go out and get 25,000 signatures to make sure that you are challenge proof. Right, because you're going to get challenged. I mean, there is going to be a mountain of lawyers making some very good money, because that's going to be the first line that you are going to have to overcome, is being challenged. Right, so they're going to try to knock people off the ballot by challenging them. So we'll see how many people actually make the ballot.
They're talking about $6 a signature is the going rate out there right now for
$6.
candidates. $6 per signature.
Wow.
You come up with what you said
It's
it
like
was 7,000, and you need to get 21,000.
Yeah.
So you're talking $200,000 gone already, and a lot of them don't have the $200,000. The guy that is become more intriguing to me, and the guy that I think is the one that I would vote for right now, if I had to vote right now, not having heard a campaign. Willie Wilson.
Okay. Well, all right.
Willie Wilson. I mean, I look at the field and I go, there's nothing there. But Willie, I understand his compassion. I understand his common sense. I mean, Willie would be a guy to take down the photo enforced cameras, because Willie just that's just the kind of guy he is.
Well, he's listen. He's told me that he would do that. Right? He said that he would do that. I know Willie very well. I met Willie back in 1997. I actually financed his home for him when he lived out in the suburbs. We had offices that were across the hall from each other out in Matheson back then. And so, but I don't have a candidate in the race at this point. I don't have a candidate in the race because, number one, I haven't heard any plans. I have had a conversation with Brandon. I met with him a few weeks ago during the time which he had not decided whether or not he was going to enter the race. He was, going through his process of evaluating whether or not he would have the infrastructure to do it, and whether it was the right thing for him to do. Maybe he had already decided, but he just didn't say then. But I did have the opportunity to meet with him to discuss some issues that I thought that are germane to really dealing with the economic and educational deprivation that persists in the Black community. and we had a very good conversation about that. Somebody who is willing to sit down and have a conversation with you is certainly somebody that I have to give consideration to. That somebody who is willing to take your phone call and then say that they would like to sit down and talk with you. You have to give some consideration to that.
He's a very
So,
bright guy. I
yeah.
mean, there's no doubt about that.
He's an extraordinarily bright guy, and I think he's an
Extraordinary.
extraordinarily decent guy, and I think he's a very compassionate guy. And I think that, as you said earlier, there are some people that are going to wrap the CTU around him in a negative way, and then there are going to be some who will go the opposite way. But I think you have to take a total look at the person, their plan for the future of Chicago. I am looking at all of the candidates that become candidate as to what their plan is going to be to address this insidious economic deprivation that everybody thus far has seemed to look beyond or have these ideas that are more placebos than they are of any real substance. So that's what I am going to be looking at. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be having a conversation later this week because I like to talk to people on the ground. I like to talk to people on the ground to see what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. So I'm going to be having a conversation with some of the people who other people label as gangbangers or that sort of thing. I want to hear from them, and I'm going to be talking with them because that's going to shape, some of the things that you and I have talked about, and I've talked to you about the whole golden triangle piece. And we'll talk more about that when we come back because we got to take a break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to continue with the Monday night edition of the People Show right here on Intellectual Radio with Charles Thomas and Mark Wallace. We'll be picking up your phone calls right after this.
ABC7 political reporter Charles Thomas gave you the straight news. Now he's giving you real talk on the governor's race.
These Democrats are into name calling. They'll call people a racist, a misogynist, a homophobic person, or whatever, because they want to distract from the fact that they've accomplished so little in public office. And it's time people woke up and recognized that. J.B. Pritzker, what's he ever done outside of being born on third base and telling the world he hit a triple? J.B. Pritzker and his people called Darren Bailey an extremist. Darren Bailey? I met the man. He's a family farmer. Somebody who understands what it's like to go to work every day. Somebody who's fair-minded. I can trust this guy. I can trust this guy. Yeah, a farmer from Southern Illinois. Yeah. Farmer from Southern Illinois.
Paid for by people who play by the rules pack.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Mark Wallace. Charles Thomas is here. My co-host who was out with us last week. We are glad to have him back, and we are glad to have you all with us. Our phone number is 708-223-8953, 708-223-8953. We welcome your calls and your comments. Before we went to the break, I was talking about, having conversations with people and watching the substance of all of the candidates, including the incumbent mayor, which I'm very disappointed with. A lot of people are very disappointed with. But we have to, as a community, we have to certainly put strong demands on anybody who is looking for us to support them, for them to come out with a real plan that is going to address the economic deprivation that has been persisting on the south and west sides of
But
Chicago.
don't they do that every 4 years? Don't we get that? We get a plan. Somebody puts forth a plan, and it doesn't work. Not on the south and west sides. It works downtown. It's worked on the north side, but it's working on the south and west sides. And we've been listening to that for, I know, the last 30 years at least. I haven't seen anybody do anything that would live up to a promise. And why do I think one of these promises is going to fall on deaf ears again? And at what point do we begin to vote on the character of these people as opposed to what they promise?
Well, first of all, I think that voting on the character of the people is it can't be, something that we could really say. I mean, what they put forth to us, yeah. But when we talk about a plan, when I talk about a plan, I'm talking about a real plan and not these placebo ideas that sound good, right? They have catchy phrases like the Southwest invests. Okay, the Southwest invests. That sounds really good, right? But when you sit down and you analyze the economic implementation of that, because how do you build a corridor of business when you don't have a foundation of people who can support those corridors, right? You can't support them if you've got people who are unemployed at the rates of 30 and 45 and 47% that don't have real disposable income. To build a coffee house, the cafe, and all these other wonderful, sounding things, those places will be empty. They will be empty. So, but we have to get industry coming back into the city of Chicago that people can go into like they did in the 50s and 60s and 70s when they came out of high school and they were able to go into a full-time job and get paid while they were on the job training. There were no apprentice schools. They got trained on the job. One of the biggest employers in Chicago outside of the post office is the city. And so
It is the largest employer.
it is the largest. So I'm saying that is where I think we have to give them the plan, right? And we have the demand that these plans that we know that are working in other places be implemented here on the south and west side of Chicago. Do you realize that we have passed and given upwards of $1 billion in TIF funding to the Lincoln Yards and the Project 78? One is a $6 billion project and the other is a $4 to $5 billion project that are not going to benefit the south and west sides of Chicago. So we need our own Lincoln Yards for the south and west sides of Chicago, and we have got to make sure that these people who are asking for our votes, that we demand and have a level of expectation that they deliver.
I absolutely believe that we have to be doing things on the ground, economic development wise, in order to head off the other social problems that we're having in the city. But the preeminent issue in the 2023 Chicago mayor's race will be crime. They've got to restore order to the city. And that is what voters all over the city are going to be listening for. It's very important that a voice like yours and what you just said is not drowned out by this concern for crime, which is right there at the top. And the candidate who can address crime and address the issues that you just mentioned, economic development on the south and west sides of Chicago, where, by the way, a lot of the quote unquote criminals are coming from. We got to deal with that. We got to deal with it at its root. But in the short term, the near term, there's going to have to be a candidate who says he is going or she is going to restore order to the city. We cannot have people afraid to ride the red line downtown to work. We can't have people who can't come out onto the street at night without the fear of being jumped by some 17-year-old high school dropout who has decided that he can get away with it if he does it. Got to deal with that. And I think that's going to be the preeminent issue. Unfortunately, that's going to be the issue in the campaign. And whichever candidate can convince Chicago voters that they can bring this under control, they're going to win.
Well, and that candidate has to also understand that to deal with the issue of crime and restoring order and bringing a level of peace and comfort for people who live here to feel safe, is that you have to deal with the problems that produce
Absolutely
this level of crime.
That's a generational situation.
So they have to be able to wrap this sandwich from both sides. They have to be able to wrap this sandwich. One, there has to be more visibility of our peace officers in these areas. I see too many police officers sitting in places that don't produce the level of comfort. But I also now see that what the city is doing, which they should have been doing a long time ago, where they are strategically placing police officers stationed in certain areas where maybe there are a high propensity for crime and violence. That is a deterrent, because I am one of those people. I am not in the defund the police community. I am in the restructuring of the police community, that we have a partnership. But as the current superintendent said when he did his first press conference in his whites, I'll call them, he stood up on a Monday morning and gave his first press conference to give out the statistics or whatever the numbers were. And then he said to the press that if I'm the only person standing here next Monday and week in and week out, just giving you the report, and there's not some other people standing here with me, that's all I'm going to be doing is giving you these numbers. In other words, he was saying that there has to be more than just policing. We are not going to police our way out of this problem. And I think that what candidates or politicians have done are they're playing to the emotions of people and not really thinking about how we handle this and deal with this as we have to. It's an economic depression problem that we have to deal with also in terms of or also with policing. It has to be a sandwiched type attack on these problems, because the data is there. All of they have more information of the data than we have. It's right there in front of them at why this is persisting. Wherever you have high rates of poverty, high rates of unemployment, you're going to have high rates of crime and high rates of violence. Where you have strong economies, you don't have high rates of crime, you don't have high rates of violence. You just don't have it.
Well, I mean, I think the other issue there too is family. I mean, we have to restore family, and we have as a North Star in our city. And I think as we do that, yeah, it's a long term proposition, but we have to create an environment where family comes first in the city. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to have the dysfunction, particularly with our young people who, quite frankly, are not being parented the way they should be parented. And we have to we have to establish or reestablish the North Star being the family. And I think a lot of that has to do with what the city says to its residents institutionally. We have to begin to do that. And I don't see us doing that. It was one of my great disappointments of the Obama years that we did not use, the president did not use his bully pulpit to talk about family more than he did. And I think that doesn't, just because he didn't do it, doesn't mean that we don't need to do it now. We need to start talking about family again. I don't care if it's Lori Lightfoot. I don't care if it's Willie Wilson, Brandon Johnson, whomever. They have to begin to reestablish the North Star as the nuclear family in order to restore, guidance to our young people, because right now they just don't have any. And it's going on all over the city.
Well, a contributory factor of that is incarceration of Black males, along with, again, these economic exclusionary type practices that are in place. So
how do we do that? How do we get?
But let me just kind of. I saw when I saw that a post from Brandon Johnson, because when you mentioned family, I saw a post from Brandon Johnson. But before I read the caption, you know what I saw?
Go on.
A family, a mother and a father and the children. And guess what? They were all smiling.
Was that Brandon's family?
Brandon's family.
Good.
All right. But you have a mother.
I like that.
And you have a father who are able to provide for their family. They don't have to worry about, the mother doesn't have to work 2.5 jobs and the father doesn't have to work 2.5 jobs. And they're able to be that family and provide the kinds of support and nurture and guidance to their children, because they don't have to worry about how they're going to feed those children, how they're going to provide for those children. We have got to not have this conversation without it being an inclusive conversation about how you help these families so that they can be families. Nobody in the United States of America should have to work 2 jobs in order to take care of their family. Nobody. When you have CEOs that are earning 700 and 800 times, 900 times the average employee, record profits, nobody in this country should have to do that. We have got to bring that in check. We have got to bring it in check. So, yes, I agree with you. There's no question about it that our families, and they should be. I've said all the time, I want to walk outside down Stony Island or wherever it is that I walk, and I want to see Black women that have smiles on their face pushing their strollers like I see white women on the north side trying to figure out what birthday party they're taking their child to this weekend.
Right. But even, and as important is that the male who fathered that child is walking alongside her and parenting the young man in particular, parenting him as opposed to just fathering him. And that is a huge problem, because whenever I see these people on the air and they're mourning the loss of a child, it's a woman. Where's the father?
I can guarantee this. I can guarantee you that if we bring more in line of erosion of these exclusionary practices, this economic deprivation that persists in these communities where fathers are able to earn a decent living to provide for their family, can work 8 hours a day, come home, be with their families, and can have a wife at home if she wants to be home to nurture the children and see them off to school and back home and homework and that sort of stuff. And they're able to have dinner together a few times a week. I can guarantee you that if we deal with the economic deprivations, we will deal with all of those other social problems that are persisting in these communities.
How do you get these? I would assume they're businesses that are going to hire people and pay them that wage. How do you envision that happening?
I'll tell you exactly how I envision it happening. It wasn't my idea. It was something that I found. We have to, this is where government's real job is, to roll their sleeves up and not let it be so for the people who are within that system, but really truly being public servants. And that is going out and getting industries. They just passed this CHIP Act, right? That was going to provide lots of resources for people to start manufacturing in this country. And we have to do more of that. But we have to go and we have to find those industries, make deals with those industries to bring their industries to our communities and bring them to Chicago. And then the deals that we make with them, we're giving you this support. We're giving you these tax breaks and these tax subsidies for you to bring your industries here, and then for you to train and hire the people from within our communities to build your products. We want you to make record profits so that you can pay really good wages to people so they can start here and retire here, so that we can build thousands upon thousands of jobs in these industries. And we have these industries here, which is going to open the doors for small businesses to develop in our communities, people who want to have a coffee shop or people who want to start another small business. They have a pool of working class people to support them like we once had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when we had lots of industry in Chicago. And so 70% of all employment in Black Chicago in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s was in labor. We have to go back to making sure that that happens. They did this and are doing this in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi. We need to be doing it here.
We've talked about this a lot. And I think I didn't want to be the killjoy. But the unions are going to fight tooth and nail to stop anything like that from happening. And now that they're going to have this Amendment 1, which I really don't fully understand, but the word is that they are going to be able to plant the union flag on virtually any company that would set up shop in Illinois.
Well,
it would be easier for them to do that.
Well, basically what the Amendment 1 is not going to raise your taxes. All this nonsense that people are talking about raising your taxes has nothing to do with that. What it is saying that they want to ensure and enshrine that Illinois doesn't become a right to work for less state. All right. Now, I have my issues politically with some things about unions, and I've had my own dealings with some unions when, and I'm a small operator. And one time I had, for a small operator, I had a lot of employees. And my partner and I, and the unions tried to come in and basically be thugs coming into my business. And I had to go thuggery back with them. But I still think that there's a place for unions to protect people, especially in big business, where they're using to have somebody that's there to make sure that workers that are helping these companies make all of this money, that the workers participate in that. They ought to participate in that because the big CEOs could not be the big CEOs without the people on the lines and in the middle. So, but I believe that there is a place for everybody to participate when you have the table more balanced in terms of and setups. Now, when you talk about unions in Illinois and Chicago back in the day, there were no black representation in the development of those unions. Today, that playing field can and should look differently from the outset. So we just have to make sure that there is equity all the way around from the start to the finish. That's how we deal with the unions. We can't have somebody coming in thinking that they're going to dictate. The whole days of the Capone type and what's that guy's name that's missing?
Jimmy Hoffa.
The Hoffa days. Those are the days that are past. Those are the days are past. So I'm not afraid of you. I think that unions, again, have their place, but they don't have their place to operate like they're gangsters.
Yeah, I'm just, my only concern is that if we take a new approach where we want to bring companies in and offer them all kinds of tax breaks to come here, the politicians very well could do that. But at the same time, the same politicians are tied up with the unions, and how will they actually execute a rebirth of manufacturing, essentially, is what you're saying, a rebirth of manufacturing in a big city like Chicago. It hasn't happened, and the politicians really haven't shown any tendency to want to do that, because I think in large part they're listening to the unions, and the unions are saying, hey, if you come in here and you want to pay somebody $35 an hour to do a job, which I think is probably what we're talking about here, they're going to want their cut. And we have a situation where the unions are very powerful, and I don't think they're going to back off. And I think that if something like that were to come to Chicago, where a new a chip company was going to set up shop here, they'd want to get a piece of the action. It would be a problem. I'd like to see how it works out, how something like that works out, because we talked about it before. I think it's absolutely the way to go. But I'm also seeing the political landscape in Chicago. And this is a strong union town. And I think the fact that Amendment 1 is going to be enshrined into the Constitution is just another sign that maybe this isn't the place they're going to go. They want to go to Mississippi. They want to go to South Carolina. They want to go to Indiana because they're right-to-work states.
Well, I think that people will want to come to Chicago. I think we can make deals with corporations from the outset, in industry from the outset. There's going to be a ton of opportunities for that to take place. I think there has to be the political will from the people that we hire. And then what we have to do is we have to use our force more collectively as a voting union to make that voice stronger than allowing for unions to be able to just dictate to us.
Well, that's what they're doing now.
Right.
They're dictating
Well, that's
to us.
that's what they've been doing. But I think that we have to reorganize. We have to reorganize as a block of people. We have to reorganize so that we have as strong of a voice. I don't know of any group of people that have a strong voice that don't have a collective number.
Well, you look at I look at the field. I love to hear a candidate talk like you during the campaign, and that he would have a red X on his forehead. Certainly. But I'd love to hear a candidate talk like that to us, and he would have, and all those chits would begin flying as the unions would call in their chits from all the money they've given these politicians over the years. You got to run, man.
Well, I've joked about it. I've joked about running not to win, but to force the conversation to where it should be.
That's
to
something.
force the conversation
Give me some
to
love on
run,
that, man.
to force the
Conversation.
conversation.
Force the conversation.
That's the reason why I would run, is to force the conversation with everybody else that is on the ballot. I would make them talk about it the same way that we made them talk about red light cameras. I would make them
talk
address.
Make them
address it, right? So I wouldn't be running to win. I would be running to make them talk about it.
He didn't mean that. He's running to win. He's running. He's running to win. Man, that's great that you would make that announcement here on the People Show.
Yeah. Well, listen. As long as there is a People Show, I am going to be talking about things that impact the people and the poor. Nobody is talking about those people. Nobody is talking to their issues.
You know why? Because there are no poor white people in Chicago.
Well, no, not like there are
poor
white people. No.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, there's no
poor white folks.
There's no poor white folks in Chicago. You don't have any poor white, what do you call those, trailer homes in Chicago. As a matter of fact, they have gotten rid of most of the trailer homes in the surrounding immediate suburbs. The last trailer home park, there was, no, not the last. There's still one out in Calumet City, but there was one in Calumet Park. They have gotten rid of that one, and now they're going to be developing that one.
Yeah, you got to go to Indiana to find yourself some.
Well, I mean, that's like a third world country over there, out there in Indiana. I mean, it just, it's depressing. I went to Indiana. A guy called me about a loan, and I didn't want to be dismissive or president, what do you call it? Prejudice, president, or whatever. I didn't want to prejudice the loan. And, but I knew that I couldn't help this person. So I went out there and I drove out there, and I'm telling you, the more I drove, the depressor I got. The more I drove into the landscape, the depressor I got. And the only place that I saw any type of vibrancy going on, but there was death all around it, was a casino. I mean, the parking lot was jam-packed. It was beautifully paved, and the building was gorgeous, but around it, it was desolate. Houses falling over.
That's the Hard Rock thing.
Yeah. And it was just depressing. So I think that there has to be that conversation. There has to be that conversation to say to the unions are important. They just can't be like Gestapos. There's no more Gestapos.
Well, they can't stop economic development. That's the thing. I mean, if we have a problem,
which is stupid on their part in the first place.
But don't you see how, when you look at the crews working on public works projects, and you see very few black people working there in an area where we make up 15 to 20% of the metro area, I would think you'd see more black people working on these road crews. I mean, these aren't people that needed PhDs or master's degrees in order to get those jobs. Now, they have skills, very, very developed skills, and they were trained, I'm sure. But you mean black men don't want to be trained to get jobs that pay $75 an hour? Or is there some effort made to stop black men from getting those jobs? And aren't those people who run the heavy equipment, for instance, Local 150, the engineers, don't they, don't they call themselves Democrats? Doesn't, at some point, Toni Preckwinkle, the chairman of the party, doesn't she sit there in some proximity to these union leaders? And why doesn't she say to them, hey guys, do you think maybe you could kick it up a notch so that we could maybe get some more Black people working on some of these jobs that we see you guys doing? I don't see that happening. I don't see where there's any pressure from within the Democratic Party to force some of their own constituents to be fair. And it's very disillusioning to me that they don't do that. And if someone like yourself were able to impress upon the Black political leadership, hey, do your job. Why don't you talk to, what's his name, Jim Sweeney at Local 150, and tell him how many Blacks do you have working on your heavy equipment? And is there some way that we can help you to find people? I'm not hearing that conversation ever on the part of our Black elected officials. They don't press the issue. And it's troubled me for decades. Why I don't hear that conversation?
Well, you don't hear the conversations because the truth of the matter is that most of the people within the system are in the system for the hustle for themselves. Because, in part, we on the outside as the voters, as the community, we haven't organized ourselves to put pressure on them to deliver.
The Black ones.
Right.
Yeah.
In particular,
In
the Black
particular,
ones,
yeah.
Okay. We haven't applied the necessary pressure because the Black ones are inside of now a system that still have these, this is what I call exclusionary processes and exclusionary practices where when I come outside of my house and I see all these public works going on, and I see today, there were 5 people on my corner working this morning at 7 o'clock. 1 was Black. The other 4 were white. But that is also because our public works, about 50% or better, has been privatized. And these are companies that don't even operate within the state, let alone the city.
But aren't they required to have Black people and Latino people and other people of color, as they call them, working in order to get their contracts with the city? And where is the enforcement arm that is supposed to be monitoring them so that they do hire people of all shades and hues? Who's in charge of that? Now, that's a political job. That's an appointed job. And for some reason, that person is falling short because the leadership is falling short. They aren't insisting on that. But see, I think it's different. The unions give money to campaigns, and the elected official gets the money from the union, and they're not going to say anything to the union after they take the money because they know where the union's coming from. They know that they're steeped in nepotism, the trade unions. We all know that. That's an established fact. So nobody attacks them. Nobody says anything to them about it. And
there has to be some people who are willing to pay the price, like Richard Borkin. He paid the price for standing up to say and do the right thing. He paid the price. As a matter of fact, it was Brandon Johnson who unseated him, right, in a runoff. But he did the right thing. He did the right thing by saying to Toni Preckwinkle, who I was never, a big Toni Preckwinkle fan. And in fact, I voted against her when she was running in the mayoral campaign. I wasn't voting for Lori. I was voting against Toni Preckwinkle. But Richard Borkin did the right thing to stand up to say, hey, you want to place this false tax on people. You want to place this false tax on people. when in fact you have 15 vacant jobs. Now, I learned this a few years ago, that vacancies, just because those jobs are not filled with people, you still have to fund them in the budget.
Right.
Okay. So Richard Boykin said, let's get rid of those vacancies. You had 1,500 vacancies there that are not being filled.
It's your slush fund.
The unions want you to keep them there so that they can put their people there when you start hiring again. But let's get rid of those 1,500 vacancies. And she came out saying that this was a health thing. And then when she got caught in that untruth, then it became, well, I'm going to have a $200 million hole in the budget. And then when he kept pointing to, well, no, you got 1,500 vacant jobs there that are funded to the tune of about $112,000 a year. Let's get rid of some of those and we won't have this shortfall. She balanced the budget without having to raise taxes or without having to lay off people that year. So it is that kind of courage that we have to have, people who are willing within there. But we've got people who are in these positions that would never be earning the kinds of dollars that they're earning in the private sector, that are willing to sacrifice us. But that's where we have got to reorganize ourselves so that we can put the pressure on them and they can be more fierce of us than allowing for them to go in and cut all these deals and we become their sacrificial pawns. That's really where we as the voters, we have got to be. This I've heard a radio talk show somewhere, a guy said, well, politics is not a spectator sport. You've got to get involved. You got to be active. And that means that we all have to play our part. But if we get a big portion of us playing our part, nobody has to be overtaxed.
No, you definitely have to put them on notice.
Yeah.
You have to put them on notice.
We've got to.
Find every way you can to put them on notice.
We've got to.
Because they definitely are part and parcel of the problem. And I can see, just looking at the current campaign, I mean, because all the county commissioners are running right now. Tony Preckwinkle is running right now. But there is no pressure. There is no pressure on anybody, at the county.
Not even from the voters.
Not even from the voters. And the thing about it is we're about to enter into another phase with the city where we're going to have the same problem if we don't organize in order to let them know what they have to do.
Well, see, that's why I think
we're watching.
I think it's incumbent upon us who have these platforms available to us. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to try and drive that kind of organizing, right? We have to drive people to that kind of organizing and get people riled up to get active and to be organized and not to be fractionized. See, fractionization works for the people who are in these public spaces. But get organized, you get the attention of those people when you're organized, because they follow people who are organized, who have the information, who have a great argument. They can't ignore those. They can't ignore those people. And for too long, people in Chicago have been afraid of their politicians instead of the politicians being afraid of the people. I found that out when I started doing the red light camera thing. People started telling me, man, you need to have a security guard. What do I need a security guard for? And these people, these people are treacherous. You messing with their money. I'm telling you, people were telling me this, right? Because these people have them thinking that they have that kind of power. They think that we're back in the days of Capone.
I'm having an out-of-body experience right now.
You're having an out-of-body experience,
man, because you're like you're telling the story of the last 2 to 3 months of life, and you're just telling it. I mean, in such a way, everything you said about politics not being a spectator sport, that you have to start a conversation, and you do what you do to start that conversation, and you take a lot of heat for it. And you have people tell you, man, you need to get a bulletproof vest. You mean you got people, I know the feeling. I know exactly what you're saying. And God bless you, man, because I know that what you were doing with photo enforced, whatever, speed cameras or whatever, and 10 by 10 to win, that you went out there a long time ago, and you don't know, man, how much of a inspiration you are to people, including one sitting 2 feet from you, in terms of what I do. And that's because you started doing it a long time ago. And I used to cover you when I was a reporter. What's that guy doing? Who is that guy? What's he talking about? Who? Mark? Who? What? Yeah, yeah. But after a while, I began to understand what it is. And the thing is that we need people to do what you do, what you have been doing on their own platform, and to keep that kind of pressure on. Because if you're just one, that's something. But if you're two, that's more. And if you're 2,000, and so on, then change happens.
If you're
Then change
if you're 10 by
happens, and-
10 to win, you can get up to 1,000,000 5 times
Right,
over.
right,
You can get up
right.
to a 5 times over.
And that's a vision. That's
Yeah.
a vision, but you got to keep the vision going. And when I do things, and a lot of things you don't agree with that I do, but understand why I do them. Understand why I do them and why I have to go out there and make a difference. And if I can find ways to get it done, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna try it. And I don't see myself as a pariah of any sort, sellout, whatever the names they call you. But the fact of the matter is, you gotta press the issue. You gotta start the conversation, because if there's no conversation, there's nothing. The conversation has to happen, because that's the first stage. If you tell them what you want, then they got to think about, well, I wonder if anybody else is thinking that way, because you put it in the atmosphere. I mean, that's biblical.
Write the vision down. You got to write the vision down.
Mm-hmm.
You got to write the vision down, and you got to make it plain. You got to write the vision down. You got to make it plain. I think that we have to back up of all the name calling because of the things like the incident that just happened to Paul Pelosi, which was horrible. That happened, and because of the elevation of all of the distractions, and I'm calling them distractions, and I'm not going to split hairs on that. I simply believe that together we rise, divided and disconnected, we fall. It has happened all the time. When Harold Washington became the mayor of the city of Chicago, Black folks came together from many different factions, but they came together. He got 97% of all registered Black voters. Now, white folks had to take off their masks, because the white folks back then that Black people thought were their friends realized that, wait a minute, as long as their power structure wasn't being interfered with, they were okay. But when they saw the threat, they jumped from one side to the other like nobody's business. In the history of Chicago, there had never been a Republican candidate that has ever gotten more than 17% of the vote in the history of Chicago. And when Harold Washington ran, he only won by about 40,000 votes. But so while all I'm saying is we don't have to be anti anybody, we just have to be more pro our communities and saying and demanding that we are no longer going to allow for you in office, black or white or Latino or whatever the ethnicity is, Democrat or Republican or whatever label that you go by, these black people that make up still the largest single voting bloc in the city of Chicago are not going to allow for you to take advantage of us anymore. When we do that, you'll see, not only will you see some people who don't look like us taking flight, we'll see some people who look like us take flight, and they ought to take flight. But we will elevate the power from the people that we ought to have.
Yeah.
And we do have. We just aren't using it. No different than a lamp. A lamp is powerless as anything until you plug it in.
Until you plug it in. That's right. That's right.
We've got to plug in.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, man, what else is on the agenda here?
Okay, we had a good conversation about that, man. But Julia Roberts.
Oh yeah, you were telling me that story, man. I had not heard that before.
She did this interview with Gayle King on this A&E history thing that they were doing, and she did an interview, and it was revealed today that Julia Roberts, the fame, she has an Academy Award, doesn't she? Didn't she get an Academy Award for Pretty in Pink or something like that?
Really?
Yeah, with
Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman,
or
something
she won
like
an Academy Award.
I think so. I might
Really?
be wrong.
That's
She
a very
was
famous movie.
Yeah,
I
it was
know
a
my
very
wife
famous movie.
watches it constantly on a loop.
Hey, see, I'm not even going to get off topic about that, but I'll make a comment to watching a movie over and over. This is a movie that I watch over and over and over again, like I have just only seen it the first time. It's called As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson. Well, you must know about it. You must have
I've
seen
seen
it a
it.
few times.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, Julia Roberts revealed that Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King paid for her hospital bills for her birth, for her mother and her father.
Yeah. Now you told me the story, but you should tell it again because it's interesting.
Yeah. So her father, Walter and Betty Lou Roberts, became friends with the Kings in the early 1960s down in Atlanta. Her mother had this dance art school, and Coretta Scott King was trying to get her children into some different art programs that they were running up against problems getting them in. And she reached out to Julia Roberts' mother's school, called her and said, my name is Coretta Scott King, and I'm trying to get my children into an art school, and I'm having a problem in doing it. Can you help us? And she said, sure, come on down. So she took her kids down, and Julia Roberts' mother, Betty, took them in, and, they started a friendship. Julia Roberts, I think, was born in 1968 or 69 or something like that. And she her parents got pregnant, or mother got pregnant, and went I guess they had some financial challenges with trying to meet the medical expenses, and Coretta Scott King and Dr. King reached out and helped them out.
Oh, really? So her birth was paid for, at least in part, by Dr. King and Coretta Scott King.
It was paid for in full.
In full.
In full.
Mm.
They paid all of the medical bills for her birth, for her parents. I thought that was a very interesting story.
Yeah, very interesting story, because I'd never heard it before.
Never.
I mean, how something like that could stay on the low for like 50 years almost.
Yes.
Over
57 years. She's 58 years old.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. So that had to have
old.
been like in the mid 60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a fascinating story.
But there are stories like that. Rosa Parks, her rent was paid by the owner of the Detroit Lions, and he owned.
I hear stories like that, and I'm inspired by them, and I'm inspired by the people who were involved in those stories. And what really troubles me is when I see people today, particularly young people, go negative about people, about they will make some general comment about white people
or Jewish people
or any kind of people. But those are the stories that they are great stories. They're stories about a great people
who didn't do it for headlines
and a great country. You following me? You're not making any faces yet. They're stories that they're stories that should inspire. Those are the stories. We hear all this stuff about critical race theory and teaching it in school. I have no idea what critical race theory is. I got to admit that. I've read about it.
If you're not a law student, you wouldn't have any reason to.
I don't know what it is, and get people are all worked up about
Again,
it.
that's another thing that has politicized to push whatever.
But I mean, but my point is that there are great moments in American history that should be the theme of any history lesson. I think the greatest moment in my lifetime in my lifetime, in terms of what's happening in America, was in Grant Park on November 3rd, I think it was, in 2008, when Barack Obama stood there with Michelle and the girls, and this light was shining on them they created the stage light, but it was an electricity. It was a moment. It was a moment that, this is not to say what happened after that, but I'm talking about that moment that, it brought me, I was out there working and I could barely do my job because I was on the verge of tears, because I'd lived this whole life in this place and I'd seen all these struggles, and now I'm looking at a black man standing there with his black wife and black children, having been elected leader of the free world. And it was a great moment. I don't care who you were. You could be you could be the most mundane, racist white person from wherever, but you had to admit, damn, this country's come a ways. It's come a ways from where it has been. And there have been other great moments like that in American history. The Declaration of Independence was great because it was ideals. It wasn't law. It was an ideal. But the Constitution wasn't great because they enshrined slavery in it.
Mm-hmm. But it was also an ideal that can evolve.
It can evolve, yeah. But it did. Mm-hmm. But at that moment in 1789, it was not. There was a civil war, and Reconstruction after was a great moment. Americans died in this horrible institution of slavery, and then tried to fix the society over the next 15, 20 years. Didn't work. Then Jim Crow wasn't great at all. That was horrible. But 1955, Brown versus Board of Education, when they ended statutory segregation, that was great. That was, wow, look at those Americans. Look at that.
And that was because of John, forget his name, who was on the Supreme Court, who had written the dissenting opinion about the Plessy versus Ferguson, which was used to end the segregation of education. So that's, another time where you see greatness being
Greatness.
exemplified.
And then,
So,
then 64 Civil Rights Act, you had Voting Rights Acts, you had I mean, Vietnam wasn't great, that's for sure.
Mhm.
But then you had, the American technology put a man on the moon. I mean, that was great. I mean, so you have these moments of greatness in America, and they've always been there. But if you teach in school how racist America is, or how America has overcome racism to the extent that it has, because it's still there, but to the extent, do you teach it with a positive spin or do you teach it with a negative spin?
well,
And
that all depends. That all depends on the person's agenda. So where you were talking about before is when people saw Barack Obama being elected to the highest office in
the world,
the world, what you and millions of other people, black, white, whatever, was feeling was hope
yeah,
that we're making progress.
yeah,
All right. I read the other day in a Pew study about interracial marriage, and they're 58 years old. This polling, Pew, when they started, interracial marriage was, when they did the polling then, was only accepted by 4%
Mhm.
of the pollers. Do you know what it is today? 96%.
yeah. No, but that is a story. That's a great story. Now you teach any kind of history you can teach it either in a nationalistic vein, or you can go negative with it if you want, I guess. But my point is, when I hear somebody like Joe Biden talk about MAGA Republicans, I go, man, there should be some MAGA Democrats. There should be some MAGA independents. There should be some MAGA libertarians. Everybody should be trying to make America great, and stop, this and I know the connotation with Trump and make America great again, but I get that. But the fact of the matter is, everybody should be trying to make America great, even if it means that is America going to be great when we finally have health care for all, that people don't have to go broke getting health care? That would make America great. That's a great thing. If nobody had to worry about getting sick and being unable to pay for it, that's great. So here I am. I'm talking about something that might be way left on the spectrum, but to sit there and call people, say that somehow if you want to make America great again, that you're somehow anti-American? No, that's a call to the future. That's a call to the future and the progress that has been made, and that troubles me whenever I hear him say that, because it's divisive.
I think that yeah, it's divisive on one hand, but it was also made divisive on another hand, and then you then had these two sides. Because I was watching some political debates from the 1960s, Republicans and Democrats. Do you know how they referred to each other?
Probably, sir.
No, my friend on the other side.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
my friend on the other side. There was a level of respect.
Barack wrote about that in his
Okay.
first book.
Yeah.
You know what he wrote?
Yeah.
He said that people like Bob Dole got along with people like, give me a name of a senator back in those days who may have been World War II.
Tip O'Neill.
Yeah, they got along because they remembered being in trenches in World War II and having to depend on each other. And there was nothing that was going to come between the fact that they were countrymen, and that and Barack wrote about how he learned to deal with the other side by watching these guys that shared
And I have to give him
I
credit.
gotta give him
He
credit, too.
tried to do that, but there were other people who abandoned what other Republicans like Jack Kemp, one of the greatest Republicans that I know
Yeah.
in my lifetime. All right. Dwight Eisenhower was another one, but I don't remember living it, but I lived Jack Kemp, right? Who was a very decent man, right? He was, I forget, whose vice president he was back then, but he was a decent person. When Barack Obama got elected, not only did we see some changing and some hope, but we also saw that there were some people who were not quite ready for that kind of change and who fueled it, who put sourness on that hope. It's better, instead of embracing that and saying, hey, we as America have made some progress. Let's keep the progress going.
Well, but
Let's keep the progress going.
They were from both sides. They were from both sides that did that, and they poisoned the well, and they seemed to want
but
both Republicans and Democrats.
But you never heard a Democrat before. You never heard a Democrat before say to a elected president that we are going to do all that we can to make sure that you're not successful.
I've heard Chuck Schumer say some fairly incendiary things about, Trump, certainly.
I'm talking about before.
No, I'm talking about when he
I'm
said
talking about
that
before. I'm not talking about what has mushroomed. I'm not talking about what has mushroomed. I'm talking about before, when I was a kid watching political debates. I didn't know who was a Democrat from a Republican on a stage, because they called each other and referred to each other respectfully as my friend from the other side.
Yeah, I bet
aisle,
the rhetoric today is
So
on
all
both
I'm saying
sides, on both sides.
to what you were saying earlier about
just
seeing Barack Obama on that stage, why it was bringing tears down your eyes and the emotions was that, man, this is the thing that we ought to be aspiring to, is improvement and making the country better for everybody, right? Not seeing how we can exemplify our weaknesses, but we work on our weaknesses because we have them, right? You acknowledge that you got weaknesses and you work on them. Where those areas where you're weak, acknowledge that I'm weak right there and I need, to deal with those. Let's deal with the strengths that we do have. Let's exemplify those and let's work on.
I mean, when I remember,
weaknesses.
I remember one of the most tragic things I ever saw in Washington, and it was back when Trump was giving his State of the Union address, and Nancy Pelosi tore it up in the background. I said, "Oh my gosh!" Did she just do what I think she did? And then she with a flourish dropped it. It was like, oh man, just total disrespect. Not so much for Donald Trump, but for the office of the presidency. And things been, not that they were already not in motion going the other way, but it was, to me, a breaking point when the Speaker of the House did something so cheap, theatrically cheap, that we knew we were going to be in serious trouble. And we have been since then. And
we were in serious trouble when what was produced was allowed to happen.
But what was that?
Donald Trump, I think his election was really something that spoke on the entire structure of our government.
But
not just
who voted? Who elected him?
Half of America did. So,
but isn't that democracy?
I think that it was democracy, but I think it was also that that people were frustrated with its government. That I think that was a bigger part of it, but certainly it was democracy. But I think that was democracy saying to the governmental structure that you all have failed, and you are failing, and we are sick and tired of it. And so I think to that degree, we ended up with the person that we ended up. But I'm really more focused on the the progression and the hope that we
here's where I'm
can
coming from on that. I, for the life of me, do not want Donald Trump to run for president in 2024. I do not want to see him indicted and put in jail and all that. I'm not into that. I want him to go away so that
he's not going
independent. Away. Well, but I want him to. I'm just telling you what I want.
I know.
I would like to see him go away so that Democrats and independents and even Republicans who are invested in hating him so much that they have an off-ramp so that they're able to just forget about Donald Trump and elect somebody who will restore peace in the world, number one. That's critical. That's more important to me than climate change. Believe me, I ain't even thinking climate change when the Russians are aiming those 5,000 nuclear weapons over here. I would like to see somebody. I would like to see somebody control the border. I'd like to see that happen. I mean, not saying keep people out, but control the border so that the drugs don't come over and the people that we don't want over here don't come over. Those things in particular. And of course, somebody to bring the economy under some control in terms of pricing. But it can't be Donald Trump because he is so divisive.
Well, Republicans and Democrats are failing at this price gouging that is going on because they do have a mechanism that they can put into place to stop the price gouging, but neither side is willing to work with each other
kind of difficult
to do that. So I'm just saying that they have a mechanism.
Yeah.
Both of them have a mechanism.
I don't know what that is.
Well, they have a mechanism that is in place. No, they have a mechanism in place that can stop corporations from hiking prices, right, unwarrantedly. The government
like
absolutely has that.
Central government can actually can put price controls on the economy.
They have that in Congress.
I mean, if that's true, won't do it. Just you're saying it scares me because I don't really know how it could happen without a lot of people going out of business. Big companies going out of business, in particular, if you put price controls on them, it flies in the face of capitalism.
No,
and I'm not here to defend capitalism. I'm just saying that's the system that we have here. And if we want to start to tinker with it like that, who knows? I mean, who knows where that could lead one step down the road if you start really put price controls on your business.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about price gouging. Here we have in places where they are just companies are earning record profits, and they're still saying that we have to raise pricing. It's completely untrue.
But like, what is price gouging to one person is maybe not price gouging to that particular corporation. Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, because I'm no economic genius here. I'm just saying that if you started to put price controls on business.
Well, we had price controls in place.
Where?
We had a top tier tax rate of 94% pre-1980.
Right.
That if you were that if you were a major corporation, wealthy corporation, CEOs, if you took more than, at that time it was $3 million a year out of your business, anything over that you had to pay 94 cents on the dollar. Hold on a second.
To tell you how much.
But wait a second. But hold on a second. That what that forced was corporations invested, expanded their business, expanded jobs opportunities, People were working here. We were making products here. You could get your clothing that had an American label on it, and as opposed to allowing for companies to close up, giving them these great tax breaks to close up their shops and ship these jobs overseas at slave wage.
I feel you, man. I hear you.
So that's all I'm saying.
I hear you, but I think that to do that would be a political nightmare.
Well,
to do that,
listen,
because
we're
then
living a political nightmare.
Exactly.
We're living the political nightmare of Ronald Reagan 42 years later.
Man, we don't talk about Ronald Reagan, because I told you we were doing the grand under Ronald Reagan, man.
He eroded all of that.
We had the 80s were a wonderful time here in Chicago.
He's dead and gone, and we're still living a nightmare.
Earl, how we doing, man? 5 minutes, very good. Yeah, we agree to disagree.
Okay.
Just like the old guys in the U.S. Senate when they would call each other my good friend.
Yes. Some other things that happened in the news: Brazil elects Lula da Silva as their president. No, he defeated the incumbent.
Right. But he had been president before.
Right. And then did you hear about this story about the 14-year-old girl accused of grand theft for stealing $10,000 of her grandmother's money, and she went to school and handed it out to all of the kids because her grandmother wouldn't.
How old was she? 14.
14.
Man,
she took $10,000 of her grandmother's money.
Your grandmother had the money under a mattress or something?
I guess so, in a shoebox or something. And she went to school and she just was handing this money out to all of her classmates because her grandmother wouldn't give her some money.
So what happened? Did the grandmother going to get the money back, or just?
How are you going to get it back? You're gonna go to each one of those kids and tell them, give my money back. I guess the parents coming home was like, where'd you get this $100 from? Oh, Susie gave me $100 at school today, right? You're going to go to all these kids' house and get that $100?
That's incredible.
Well, she was charged with.
What was the one you said right before that? All about Brazil.
Brazil.
You know what's really interesting, man, is that the Chinese are making a real effort to involve themselves in Brazil and in other South American countries in order to corner the resources from those places. And Brazil is now part of this outfit called BRICS. You heard about that? It's Brazil.
No.
Yeah, it's 5 countries. It's called BRICS, man. You get it. You can get it. No, it's an interesting story, man, because the Chinese are making a serious move in South America while we're sitting there, preoccupied with Ukraine and Europe. The Chinese are involved in this outfit called BRICS, which is to BRICS.
Let's see.
BRIC.
And
no.
BRICKS.
I think so. Yes, sir. Because Saudi Arabia, BRICS members. Yeah, BRICS members. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they're forming an economic cooperation. Of course, China's the big player in it because they got, a billion and a half people, and plus they're the number 2 economy in the world. But they're organizing in South America around Brazil. And what's really, to me, we are preoccupied with Europe to the point where we're now on nuclear brinksmanship with the Russians over Europe, when the Chinese are making their move with India, Brazil, South Africa, and Russia. I mean, at some point in time, American foreign policy, we got to realize that most of the people in this country do not come from Europe. Okay? They don't. They come from all over the world. And we have to begin to redefine ourselves as this country of people from all over the
Yeah,
world,
but I
not
think
just Europe.
I think they're trying to do that, but when you have somebody like a Putin who is aggrieved by something that one of his own countrymen did, that he wants to inflict,
Which own countrymen? I'm sorry.
Gorbachev breaking up the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So he is very aggrieved by that, and so
30 years ago.
Well, but that he started this unprovoked attack on
let's
on
talk
country.
about that unprovoked, because I think there's some information that we have to have here. When the Soviet Union broke up, when Gorbachev got his way, the deal was that NATO would not expand east of Germany or east of Poland into Ukraine. That was a deal. It was on paper. That was the deal. So what has happened since then is that Ukraine is petitioning to get involved in NATO, and the Russians, are reacting to that.
No, it's the other way around.
No,
the Russians,
they're reacting
the Russians
to
are
that.
the Russians.
That's a Russian.
That is what Putin is utilizing.
Thank you. That's what he's
utilizing
saying.
That.
That's
but
what
that
he's
did not
saying.
happen.
Well, but
until
that's what
after
he's saying.
He made this.
That's what he's saying.
This attack,
and that's what his.
No, he's more aggrieved.
But we got to
that he
understand what he's telling his people
control
and how he's got people aiming weapons at each other and shooting and killing people.
Yeah, but
this is his rationale. I think people should understand what he's saying to his own people. It's
politics. They do understand what he's
It's
saying to his own
politics.
people, but I think his own people are realizing that he's been lying to them.
I don't know. The first casualty of war is truth. I don't know what's going on in Russia.
All right, listen, folks. You have been listening to a spirited conversation between two friends, Brother Charles Thomas and Mark Wallace, on this Monday night's edition of The People Show. We'll be back with you next week for a new edition and another edition of The People Show right here on Intellectual Radio.
Good night.
For 25 years, ABC7 political reporter Charles Thomas gave you the straight news. Now, he's giving you real talk on the governor's race.
These Democrats are into name calling. They'll call people a racist, a misogynist, a homophobic person, or whatever, because they want to distract from the fact that they've accomplished so little in public office. And it's time people woke up and recognized that. J.B. Pritzker, what's he ever done outside of being born on third base and telling the world he hit a triple? J.B. Pritzker and his people called Darren Bailey an extremist. Darren Bailey? I met the man. He's a family farmer. Somebody who understands what it's like to go to work every day. Somebody who's fair-minded. I can trust this guy. Yeah, a farmer from Southern Illinois. Yeah. Farmer from Southern Illinois.
Paid for by people who play by the rules pack.